Reconstructing the Greco-Roman religious world is an essential task, not only for the history of the Roman world, but for an understanding of the origins of Christianity. And today it's my great pleasure to have with me Professor Judith Mossman, the Professor of Classics here in Nottingham. You're very, very welcome, Judith. And in that process of reconstruction, looking at how Plutarch deals with Delphi is a key insight into the late 1st, early 2nd centuries. So can you take us into Plutarch's relationship with Delphi?
I'll try, thank you. Yes, it's fascinating that Plutarch, who most people know best as a biographer, was actually also a priest at Delphi. He was one of 2 permanent priests at Delphi from probably around the reign of Domitian until Plutarch's own death, which was just before 120 AD.
So roughly the last 30 years of his life.
Yes. A very important post, very influential, and reflected in 3 particularly of his works, which are rather off-puttingly entitled as a group the Moral Essays. Massive number of wholly disparate material, really, some of which is basic on talkativeness, for example, actually quite a humorous work, on superstition and so on. Some of it is popular morality, some of it is high-level exegesis of Plato, some of it is natural speculation, such as on the face in the moon, and so on. Now, the Delphic dialogues fall very much into the category of very sophisticated philosophical discussion, but they're also imbued with real religious feeling, to my reading. It's very important that what's going on is an investigation into the nature of the god and what people are actually doing when they come to an enormous religious site like Delphi to consult the oracle. Now, there are 3 works, as I say. The first, I would say was the first, is on the E at Delphi. It's actually the shortest of the 3, but it opens up a lot of issues which are examined then in the 2 longer dialogues. It takes place, it's set outside the temple in Delphi, and it takes the form of an investigation of a mysterious dedication, which is nothing other than a letter E. Big picture of a letter E. Why would anyone put that there, and what does it all mean? Well, there are lots of solutions proposed, including taking account of the fact that the Greek letter epsilon, or A as it was at that time, was also the number 5, the symbol for the number 5. There's a lot of stuff about how important the number 5 is, and also it's the Greek word for if, and for if only, and for you are. And the dialogue concludes that the true nature of the dedication reflects the true nature of the god. He's somebody who answers questions, but also someone who poses questions. He's a riddler, but he is the answer to everything. The worshippers are told by the god, the famous Delphic maxims, know yourself, nothing too much, and they respond to the god, you are. That's an affirmation of the existence of the deity which presides over the oracle. Now, there's a much longer dialogue, which is also set physically at Delphi and makes a great deal of the setting. It's called Why Are Oracles No Longer Given in Verse? And it tracks the progress of a party of religious sightseers. I think pilgrims is not quite the right translation, but people who have come to consult the oracle, to look at what's there, to look at all the offerings in the different buildings up the sacred way. And as they progress up the sacred way, somewhat hampered by tour guides, some things never change. They pause and look at all the various offerings and objects, and they analyse them philosophically. And again, the conversation is permanently coming back to, why is this here? What does it say about the god? What does it say about, as Plutarch calls him, our dear Apollo? And then finally, the last of the three dialogues is called On the Obsolescence of Oracles. This is a very disturbing question for Plutarch and his discussants. Why do some oracles just stop? What is it that happens which causes oracles to close down? This is partly prompted by the fact that, as is pointed out in the dialogue, there used to be more priests, more prophetesses, more Pythian prophetesses at Delphi than there are now. As we saw in the previous dialogue, oracles are no longer given in verse. The explanation that seems to be one of the very important strands of that dialogue is, well, people don't ask the same sort of questions as they used to. They come to say, should I get married? Should I start a business? They don't come to consult about the fate of nations, because all that is done by Rome these days. On the obsolescence, there's a more concerning theory which is canvassed, and that is that gods may not be permanent. Either that they are permanent and they move away from some sites, which would obviously be a pretty fair disaster if that happened at Delphi, or that they are not the lasting Olympian deities like Apollo, but demigods, daimones. That's where we get our word demons from, but they're not intended to be conceived of as wicked or bad in any way. They're just not quite gods of the first rank. Well, of course, Delphi's all right with that one because they've got Apollo. But there's a long section in this dialogue where the coming to be and the passing away of gods is contemplated. In particular, there's one very famous passage in chapter 17.
So you're going to read this passage to us?
Yes, please.
Please do.
As for death among such beings, the daimones, I have heard the words of a man who was not a fool nor an impostor. The father of Aemilianus the orator, to whom some of you have listened, was Epitherses, who lived in our town and was my teacher in grammar. He said that once upon a time, in making a voyage to Italy, he embarked on a ship carrying freight and many passengers. It was already evening when, near the Echinides Islands, the wind dropped and the ship drifted near Paxi. The point is that Paxi is an uninhabited island. Almost everybody was awake, and a good many had not finished their after-dinner wine. Suddenly, from the island of Paxi was heard the voice of someone loudly calling Thamus, so that all were amazed. Thamus was an Egyptian pilot, not known by name even to many on board. Twice he was called and made no reply, but the third time he answered, and the caller, raising his voice, said, "When you come opposite to Pylades, announce that great Pan is dead." On hearing this, all, said Epitherses, were astounded, Pylades being another uninhabited island, and reasoned among themselves whether it were better to carry out the order or refuse to meddle and let the matter go. Under the circumstances, Thamus made up his mind that if there should be a breeze, he would sail past and keep quiet, but with no wind and a smooth sea about the place, he would announce what he had heard. So when he came opposite Pylades, and there was neither wind nor wave, Thamus from the stern, looking toward the land, said the words as he had heard them, "Great Pan is dead." Even before he had finished, there was a great cry of lamentation, not of one person but of many, mingled with exclamations of amazement. As many persons were on the vessel, the story was soon spread abroad in Rome, and Thamus was sent for by Tiberius Caesar. They made an inquiry into the whole issue and discovered that Pan was allegedly the offspring of Hermes and Penelope. There it's left, really. The god is dead. That's it.
And this could explain
why certain
disappearance.
oracles no longer function. The god has left.
In that one chapter, we're actually brought into a completely different religious world to the world that Jews and Christians have when they try to reconstruct this period.
Yes.
It's been said that Jews and Christians have spent the last 2,000 years dealing with the advent of Jesus and the destruction of the temple and the shock waves. But here we find a religious discussion that is completely alien to us, and yet this is the world in which someone like St. Paul was travelling, and this is the world in which, say, the Gospels are being written. This is the world where the beginnings of the Mishna are taking place.
Yes. Yes, it's remarkable. It's also important, I think, that this. I think it's a beautiful passage. Every time I read it, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It's sometimes said of ancient Greek religion that they didn't really believe it. They were just going through the motions. It was it wasn't, a philosopher like Plutarch is not the same as anyone else in society. Either it's so rarefied that no ordinary people can deal with it, or it's simply a religion of processes without any heart. But it seems to me that from the classical end, this is an incident which suggests a very profound response, a profound religious response among a very large range of people.
Judith, thank you very much.
Thank you.